Today, the United Kingdom didn't just respond to Russia, it shattered Putin's long-term strategy with a move so decisive, Moscow is scrambling to contain the fallout. What just happened in the UK is far bigger than a headline or a diplomatic statement. This single move has already rattled Moscow, triggered emergency reactions inside the Kremlin, and shifted the balance of power in a way Putin hoped would never happen. Analysts are stunned, NATO is recalculating, and Russia's state media is scrambling to control the narrative. And trust me, you're about to understand why this moment is so critical for the future of European security. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications, because the developments coming over the next few weeks are massive, and you won't want to miss any of the updates as this story unfolds. Now let's get into the truth behind the UK's move that Putin always feared. The story begins months earlier, when intelligence reports from both British and European agencies started painting the same picture: Russia wasn't slowing down. Its long-term strategy was expanding, not shrinking. Hybrid warfare, energy blackmail, cyber operations, naval pressure in the Arctic, none of it was accidental. Putin's doctrine had already moved far beyond Ukraine, and British intelligence was one of the first to publicly acknowledge it. Behind closed doors, senior UK officials were told an uncomfortable truth: the cost of doing nothing would be far greater than the cost of action. Russia had identified the UK as both a key threat and a key vulnerability. On one hand, the British military, intelligence community, and nuclear capabilities made London a formidable opponent. On the other hand, Russia believed the UK would hesitate to escalate leadership in Europe after Brexit. That assumption, it turns out, was a severe miscalculation. The trigger moment came when the UK authorized a strategic deployment that changed the tempo of NATO's posture entirely. This wasn't simply another military package or intelligence sharing initiative. It was something far more significant: a long-term, permanent expansion of Britain's forward presence and capability integration in a region the Kremlin watches obsessively. With one signature, the UK deepened defense commitments in a manner that turned the current European security architecture from reactive to proactive. The Kremlin knew this was different. British policymakers weren't talking in vague generalities. They were naming the threats, identifying the tactics, and openly declaring that deterrence would now be built on capability, not caution. Within hours, Russia's foreign ministry condemned the UK's move as hostile, unacceptable, and destabilizing. Yet behind that bluster was something more telling: concern. What Putin fears most is momentum. And that is exactly what Britain has now generated. Analysts point to three core reasons the UK's decision hit Moscow harder than previous announcements. First, Britain has the intelligence reach that Russia respects more than it admits publicly. For decades, MI6 and GCHQ have infiltrated, tracked, intercepted, and decoded Russian signals, movements, and planning frameworks from Eastern Europe to the Black Sea. Moscow knows that when the UK makes a strategic decision, it is usually backed by top-level intelligence visibility. Second, the UK's global alliances give it a unique edge. Unlike many European nations that rely heavily on continental structures, Britain can pull power from multiple directions at once: the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, and increasingly Nordic nations. Deepening military integration with these partners creates a strategic arc around Russia that the Kremlin cannot easily counter. And third, and most importantly, Putin fears a united West under decisive leadership more than any weapon or sanction. Every time Western unity fractures, Moscow gains leverage. Every time the West moves cohesively and confidently, the Kremlin loses room to maneuver. By taking the initiative rather than waiting for consensus, the UK reshaped the playing field. Inside Russia, commentators loyal to the Kremlin immediately accused Britain of escalation, imperial ambitions, and hostile expansionism. But their tone wasn't victorious, it was defensive. The fact that Russian lawmakers felt compelled to rush out statements shows how deeply the move resonated. Russian military analysts debated on state television why the UK was showing such boldness, and whether it signaled a shift in Western military doctrine. Some argued that Britain was preparing for a long confrontation, one that Moscow could not win by intimidation alone. Meanwhile in London, officials described the move as unavoidable. According to briefings, UK strategists had grown increasingly concerned that traditional deterrence frameworks were losing effectiveness. A new model was needed, one built on sustained presence, advanced technology, and clear lines of response. This was not about provocation, it was about credibility. For years, Putin used ambiguity as a weapon. Ambiguity about military intentions, cyber operations, mercenary deployments, and energy manipulation. But ambiguity only works when opponents hesitate. The UK's decisive action effectively shattered that advantage. Clarity, backed by capability, is what Moscow fears most. The symbolism of the British move is just as powerful as the practical impact. It signals the end of an era when Western nations responded piecemeal to Russian aggression. Instead, this marks the beginning of a long-term strategic realignment, one where NATO no longer waits, but anticipates. One where European security is defined not by fear of escalation, but by readiness to prevent it. What's even more striking is how the UK's shift inspired immediate ripple effects. Hours after Britain's announcement, several allied nations began signaling their own readiness to strengthen commitments. Diplomatic conversations surged. Defense ministers accelerated timelines. The UK had done something rare, it had unlocked momentum. This is precisely what Putin hoped to avoid. His foreign policy thrives on fragmentation, dividing nations, sowing doubt, leveraging confusion. Momentum, unity, and clarity erode his strategic foundation. And this explains why the Kremlin reacted with such urgency, calling the UK's decision a threat to regional stability. In reality, it is Russia's long-standing aggression that destabilized the region, and the UK simply responded with the seriousness the situation demands. Behind the scenes, British strategists emphasized that deterrence is not a static concept. It must evolve. It must adapt. And more importantly, it must be backed by both conviction and capability. The UK's move embodies that philosophy. It redefines the boundaries of European defense planning and challenges Moscow's assumption that the West won't commit long-term resources to counter Russian pressure. For the British public, reactions are mixed but engaged. Many recognize the seriousness of Russia's evolving strategy and understand that inaction carries consequences. Others worry about escalation. But across political lines, there is a shared understanding that national security cannot rely on hope or hesitation. Internationally, the UK has regained a leadership position that even critics acknowledge. Whether one agrees with the tactics or not, the decision signals a country willing to define, not follow, the strategic direction. In geopolitical terms, that is influence, real influence. The kind that reshapes alliances and forces adversaries to reassess their calculations. As tensions rise, the Kremlin continues to project confidence. But beneath the surface, Russian planners now face a new reality. The UK is no longer acting within the predictable, cautious rhythm Moscow grew accustomed to. London is signaling readiness not for conflict, but for deterrence that Russia cannot easily undermine. This is why analysts say the UK has triggered the move Putin always feared. Not because it threatens Russia directly, but because it undermines Russia's grand strategy entirely. It neutralizes ambiguity, disrupts Moscow's long game, and galvanizes the Western alliance in ways the Kremlin has spent decades trying to prevent. The strategic balance of Europe has shifted, subtly but decisively. The next moves will determine how the story unfolds, but one thing is clear: the UK is no longer simply participating in the conversation, it is shaping it. And for the man in the Kremlin, that is a far more significant threat than any single weapon, deployment, or sanction. In the months to come, the consequences of this moment will reveal themselves piece by piece. More coordination. More joint exercises. More integrated defense systems. More intelligence sharing. Step by step, the UK is constructing a framework designed not just for today's challenges, but for the decade ahead. As the dust settles, one question hangs over every capital from London to Moscow: where does this lead next? Because if this single British decision was enough to shake the Kremlin, the next steps could reshape the entire geopolitical landscape. What's certain is that momentum has shifted, alliances are waking up, and Putin is facing a level of coordinated resolve he hoped never to see. The UK has made its play bold, strategic, and impossible for Russia to ignore. And this story is only beginning. Stay alert, stay informed, and keep watching, because the world is entering a new chapter, and the next move could be the most decisive yet.